So we've got some times for questions. I think 10 minutes, Kelly? 20 minutes? Oh. So if you want to ask a question, please stand up, say who you are and who you want the question for. Thank you. One over here.
Yeah, Andrew King. Look, Daryl, I'd just like to, I'm a Marnie Pastoral Company as well. Just like to, like you to comment on the evaluation, the objective sort of measurement of all these, of this pilot scheme at the end of, is it 3 years? Or I just thought it'd be good for a comment on that.
Yeah, I think good point, and it's something within the program that we are definitely looking at with regards to the, our levies and also the money we get from the federal government. Every 5 years we have to do evaluation of our programs to make sure there's a return on an investment. I intend to engage a company, an independent company that's going to do a value proposition, like a cost-benefit analysis. We do it in other sectors that I manage within MLA. It's quite beneficial. They're independent assessments. As you can see, when you first get into these programs, it's a bit of learning. It's just like all you guys, and as David alluded to, when you first start looking at it, it becomes a bit overwhelming. And you know, in our position, we're not living and breathing it all the time. So we're a research funding organisation that when we start investing in these areas, it's important that we engage with industry around that, adoption of that technology to really understand what that value proposition is. And you can see really starting to unfold is the data that Darren is bringing out and showing a definite cost benefit for it. David alluded to it already, that he can see where those benefits are. So I think in moving forward, we'll really have some hard numbers on what they'll be in the next couple of years.
Perth in Western Australia. To both of you, thank you very much. That was great to have that detailed explanation. I was interested around pasture growth rate and feed on offer. Since 2002 in Western Australia and since about 2008 in the Eastern Seaboard, Pastures from Space had offered calibrated weekly 6 hectare pixel size feed on offer and pasture growth rate, which has now been discontinued by Landgate. Hopefully it'll be back on deck next year. Have either of you looked at that technology, and do you see that, are there limitations to that, and see some benefits from using this more latest technology, which at this stage is still to be calibrated? I was just wondering about your choices or whether you'd had any exposure to it.
Yeah, well, we can't use pastures from space at the moment anyway, so I suppose fundamentally we've got some tool. Pastures from space is very, very popular and valuable. Many businesses have used it over the years, and it's great to hear that it's potentially coming back. What we've been sort of resorting to is subjective measurements or walking across the paddock with a plate meter. And whilst we're still developing this particular program, in that space, it's starting to give us more robust tools, not unlike what we could get previously. So I think it's a combination. I'm not wedded necessarily just to SIBO. Fluorosat are offering a really good option as well. And Ask Bill, all these other programs around there that are providing options and opinion on that sort of stuff. So it was just it's a tool that's identified itself as use and return and business change to our business. So, any
no, I don't have anything to add to that. I think covered it.
Got one up in the corner.
Hello. Yeah, Mark Sloan from Agriculture Victoria. Thanks very much for sharing what you've been up to and where you're at. Just a question for Darren. Just with the sheep tags you discussed that you've been implementing, can you just share what type of tags they are, what sort of data you've been collecting out of them, and what potential you see down the track for them?
Yeah, sure. So to date, I've got no sheep tags. So I'm hoping to see those come, going forward. So there was a bit of discussion yesterday around certain providers having something to offer. I've not tried them yet. other producers around the country are trying different things, so nothing at this stage within Carwoola.
Just a quick follow-up. Sorry. What about collars? Has anybody approached you with collars for sheep?
There is collars around. We haven't tried them because I haven't found those to be attractive to our business as being fit for purpose at this stage.
Yeah, cheers.
One down the front.
Troy Fisher from South Australia. Question for both, really. In terms of the hardware, what sort of lifespan do you expect? How robust are these sensors, etc.? And secondary question is, what sort of tech support? If it drops offline, do you guys fix it? Or sounds like there's 15 or 20 different companies involved. How do you handle that?
Yeah, so in the deployment at Carwoola, we're now 12 months in, so there's been some, feedback to certain suppliers about the way they were installed or the materials some of these devices have been built from, and also the way that they've connected them to the infrastructure. So that's an ongoing thing, and yes, some of them aren't robust enough to survive in our environment, but that doesn't mean that can't change, and that this is part of the research and development of some of these companies, and that's all part of the program to understand that. And in terms of looking for backup from companies when there's an issue or needing a greater understanding of how to access data or whatever, everyone's been very, very helpful in offering those services if we ask for them. And that's the key to this, you must ask. Because providers don't know what you don't know, and sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So as that, that becomes a bit of something that comes in front of your into the front of your mind approach, and generally they're very, very helpful.
If I can just add to that, I think when we first started on the Carwoola journey, we had 150 tech providers that put their hand up and said, yeah, we'll come out and do something. We actually had about 30 that turned up, and I think we ended up with about 20 that actually did something. So it really goes to show, you start whittling out the ones that say they can provide the technology. And we're definitely seeing the group of providers that were engaged with Romani 12 months on are like the cream of the crop and the athletes that are made to the front. Not saying that there's not others out there, but definitely you start to whittle down the ones that can provide that ongoing support and rigidity of their product.
Rick Summerton from ESAC Global. A question for Darren, sort of two questions. What didn't work for you? So you've talked about things that worked. Are there things that didn't actually work for you? That's good to know. And then when you were implementing, what were the biggest hurdles? And has battery life been an issue for you in devices?
Yeah, so something that didn't work for us, and it didn't work in our business. It doesn't mean it wouldn't work in other people's businesses, but I've struggled around gate sensors, and the battery life issue is a case in point with gate sensors. If they're not installed in the right way and you get some chatter, your battery life will wear down very quickly, and eventually you have a device that doesn't fit, or doesn't work. So that's probably the glaring one. But as I say, we still have some gate sensor type installs in certain positions like chemical rooms or loading ramp gates that don't clatter. Where it didn't work for our business was paddock gates. Battery life is always an issue in any sort of a device that's working remotely. Some companies are starting to provide, and always have in fact, provide solar panels to help with the charging. It's one more thing that has to be installed and guarded, otherwise livestock will knock them off, birds will have their way with them. But overall battery life is starting to improve as we move forward.
Darren, would you say that even the learnings of some of our tech providers, and gates is a good one, some of the tech providers that we had out there that had some solutions, when they've come out there and, you know, they've had comment from Darren and both David of their wish list, have gone back and come back with a solution after they've realised what's wanted by the property. It's a good opportunity, I think, for the providers that are going out there to get this real world experience of what people want on properties. David, I know just recently, has had some discussions around some security on his farm that looks like we've come up with a solution to deal with that we were struggling with before. So I think some of the providers are also getting these opportunities of coming up with some new solutions as well.
And they seem very interested in helping with that sort of that outcome. The other thing to be said potentially, what should be said, is that everything falls over at some time. Not everything works 100% of the time. This is the space you're living in. But you know, if it's consistent and it's accurate, they're the things we're looking for. If they're not, we won't use them anymore. And providers are really working hard, in my experience, to get that right.
One more up the top.
Suzanne Beattie from Yeppoon Grazing. I'm at Rockhampton. Have you considered what happens to the data you collect? Who stores it? How it's protected? Does it remain your data if you stop using that provider? Who retains the rights to the data that you have collected moving forward? Who has access to your data, and what happens to it when you change providers or change companies that are helping you collect and give you that data in a dashboard into the future?
You want me to have a go at that?
Yeah. Oh, I can too, or you go down.
So one thing we ensured when we put all the technology in was to ensure that each of the providers were going to share the data with each other, because when we have these platforms, you don't want one provider holding data that should be put onto a platform where they can't access someone else's, someone else, the data that's been collected by another widget, for example. The data is certainly owned by the Romani or Karwula, so it's not shared any wider than that. But certainly between providers, there's a section in there that says that the data has to be shared amongst everybody, but maintained by the companies.
Yeah, it's a very, very common question. It's a great question because everybody, as I've managed to, or been privileged to present in this sort of way quite a few times over the last 12 months, and it is probably the most common question. And I think it's a very individual choice. Everyone is concerned about it and how it works, and so it's understanding what a provider offers you in terms of security of data, and you make that very clear to the provider. And if they don't reach those parameters for you, perhaps you look for somebody else. But it's a very, very common question, not just in digital ag, but life in general these days. So, yeah.
That on? Jock Niverson from Walcott. Probably for Darryl. Is any of the models making assumptions or predictions on water budgets, like on surface water for a summer period, like integrating weather predictions, evaporation, and coming up with a water budget over a period of time? Is that a...
It's probably a good question for Darren, because he's probably been living that for the last 12 months of,
yeah, so
of how he's handling his water.
Yeah, thanks, Darryl. Yeah, so we're getting a lot of weather data as well. I didn't speak to that today, but we've got weather stations. We're talking about evaporation, rainfall, soil moisture, soil temps, daytime temps. I mean, there's a huge expanse of information there. We don't have a tool at the moment that allows, that I've seen anyway, it doesn't mean it's not there. And we've got to remember, I haven't seen everything, I'm not aware of everything, but we don't have a tool at Karwula at the moment, and certainly we don't at Windy, that is going to help us to develop a tool that will measure those sort of things. I think it's a great idea. I think someone should build something like that. But we don't have anything yet. Maybe someone will be able to tell me there is, and we can look at it.
Okay, looks like that's all the questions. So I'd like to call up Michael Crowley again just for some closing remarks. And we'll close off the session.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much, Daryl. Look, I think, judged on the engagement of that session, it's certainly an area where we'll continue to keep you up to date. As you heard, there's quite a journey from coming up with a good idea that I think David coined it really well, where's the problem for my solution, to going through the journey of thinking about what is really commercially available. And if you think about what's being deployed here and the investments and the partnership that we've had over the last 12 months that we're committed to over the next few years, keep a close eye on it. We'll be providing regular updates and you can think about how you would like to engage. Once we move from the R&D phase into the commercialisation piece, please keep talking to us. We have some partnerships through the MLA Donor Company. I think as producers, when you're wanting to get together with a group, I'd be happy to see applications coming forward through our producer demonstration site program, where we can again look to partner with you as you start to move through to proof of these technologies. Part of our investment, as Daryl said, and from Andrew's question, collecting the evidence and information as we go, so we can build that into our models and start to really give you the tangible return on investment for what these devices can do at whatever point in time as we move forward. Look, thank you. I hope that was an effective use of your time, and I certainly appreciate the panel insights. So Darren, David and Daryl, thank you. Please join me in thanking our panellists for this afternoon. Thank you.